Ladies and gentlemen, Steve Harvey. Let me talk to you for a minute about something real, something simple but powerful, doing the right thing without being asked. See, too many people wait for instructions to love properly. They wait to be reminded to show up, to care, to listen, to try. But real love, real commitment, real character doesn't need a notification. Love is shown best through action, not reminders. And this is where most people get it wrong. Too many of us believe love lives in words, promises, and explanations. We think saying, "I care," is enough. That intentions should count the same as effort. But real love doesn't sit around waiting to be announced. Real love moves. It wakes up early, pays attention, notices changes, and responds without being pushed. When someone truly matters to you, you don't need alarms to remember them. You don't need arguments to spark effort. Action becomes natural because care has already taken root. The reminders slowly turn love into labor. When someone has to keep asking for the same respect, the same presence, the same basic consideration, it starts feeling like love and starts feeling like a burden. Action, on the other hand, speaks a language that never needs translation. Showing up consistently, listening without being defensive, handling responsibilities without being chased. These things say more than 1,000 emotional speeches ever could. Love it as doesn't wait to be called out. It shows itself quietly, confidently, and repeatedly through what you do when nobody is keeping score. Effort without prompting shows maturity, and maturity is one of the rarest qualities you'll ever encounter. Immaturity waits to be told. It waits for pressure, for ultimatums, for consequences. Maturity understands responsibility before it becomes a crisis. A mature person doesn't say, "You should have asked me." They say, "I saw it needed to be done." That mindset changes everything. It changes how people trust you, how they rely on you, and how they feel safe around you. When effort has to be requested, it feels optional. When effort is given freely, it feels dependable. That's the difference between someone who participates and someone who leads. In relationships, maturity looks like checking in before distance grows, fixing problems before resentment settles in, and choosing consistency over convenience. In life, it looks like preparing instead of panicking, learning instead of blaming, and growing without being forced. People respect those who don't need to be managed. They admire those who carry their weight without being supervised. Effort without promptings sends a clear message. I understand what's required, and I take responsibility for my role. That level of maturity doesn't just improve relationships. It builds credibility, stability, and quiet confidence that follows you wherever you go. Initiative builds trust and respect in relationships because it removes doubt and replaces it with certainty. When you take initiative, you tell people they don't have to wonder where they stand with you. They don't have to guess your intentions or second. Guess your commitment. Trust is built and actions come before questions, when effort shows up without delay, and when responsibility is handled without reminders. People feel safe around those who take initiative because safety comes from consistency. When someone knows you will act without being pushed, they relax. They stop bracing for disappointment. Respect grows in the same space. Nobody truly respects a person they have to chase, manage, or constantly instruct. Respect is earned when you handle your role with awareness and pride. In relationships, initiative looks like addressing issues before they explode, communicating before silence turns into distance, and choosing to contribute even when it's inconvenient. It shows emotional intelligence, discipline, and care. When initiative is missing, relationships begin to feel unstable. One person starts carrying the emotional weight, while the other reacts instead of leads. Over time, that imbalance erodes admiration. Trust fades not because of betrayal, but because of neglect. Initiative keeps the foundation strong. It says, I'm present. I'm paying attention. You can rely on you. And when people can rely on you, they naturally trust you. When they trust you, respect follows without effort. Consistency matters more than grand gestures because life is not lived in highlights. It's lived in patterns. Anyone can do something impressive once. Anyone can show up when emotions are high or eyes are watching. But consistency reveals who you really are when things are ordinary, quiet, and routine. Grand gestures may impress for a moment, but they cannot replace daily effort. A big apology does not undo months of neglect. An expensive gift does not compensate for emotional absence. What people remember most is how you treat them over time. Consistency creates reliability, and reliability creates peace. When your actions align day after day, people don't have to decode you. They don't have to brace for mood swings or broken promises. They know what to expect, and that predictability becomes comfort. In relationships, consistency looks like steady communication, dependable presence, and repeated follow-through. It's checking in even when nothing is wrong. It's showing care even when there's no conflict to fix. In life and work, consistency is what separates talent from success. Many people are gifted, but few are dependable. Consistent effort compounds. Small actions repeated daily build stronger bonds than occasional dramatic displays. Over time, consistency builds credibility, and credibility builds influence. People trust what they can count on, not what surprises them once in a while. Grand gestures fade quickly, but consistency leaves a lasting impression because it proves that effort isn't temporary, it's a habit. True care anticipates needs, not complaints, and this is where emotional awareness separates surface level effort from genuine connection. When you truly care about someone, you pay attention beyond what is said out loud. You notice shifts in energy, changes in tone, silence that lasts a little too long. You don't wait for frustration to turn into an argument before you respond. Waiting for complaints is the lowest level of effort because by the time someone speaks up, they are already tired. Anticipation shows attentiveness. It shows that you are present enough to observe, to think ahead, and to act with intention. Care that only responds to complaints feels reactive, like damage control. Care that anticipates feels supportive, like protection. People don't want to feel like they have to plead for understanding or explain the obvious. When you anticipate needs, you tell them they matter enough for you to think ahead. That kind of care creates emotional safety because it reduces exhaustion. It allows people to relax instead of brace themselves. Anticipation is not about mind reading, it's about mindfulness. It's about choosing to stay engaged instead of distracted, choosing awareness over convenience. Doing the right thing when no one is watching defines character. Because character is not built in public moments, it is built in private decisions. Anyone can perform when there is praise involved. Anyone can act right when there are consequences on the line. But who you are alone, unseen, and uncredited is who you truly are. Integrity shows up when shortcuts are available and you still choose the long way. It shows up when silence would be easier, but honesty costs you comfort. Character isn't loud. It doesn't announce itself. It quietly repeats good choices, even when there is no reward attached. In relationships, this looks like loyalty when temptation is private, respect when your partner isn't present, and consistency when appreciation isn't immediate. In life, it looks like discipline, that supervision and ethics without enforcement. People may never know all the good you do, but your life will reflect it. Over time, character shapes reputation without trying to. What you do unseen eventually shows up in how people feel around you. They may not know why they trust you, but they will. That trust is bet on those invisible moments where you chose right without pressure. Effort without prompting shows maturity, because maturity understands responsibility without needing reminders. A mature person doesn't confuse willingness with obligation. They know that showing up is not something you do only when asked, but something you commit to because it's required. Prompted effort feels borrowed. Unprompted effort feels owned. When someone has to keep asking, it creates imbalance. One person becomes the manager, the other the participant. Maturity removes that imbalance. It says, I know my role and I will handle it. That mindset builds confidence in others. It allows people to depend on you without fear of being let down. In relationships, unprompted effort looks like addressing issues early, offering support before burnout, and contributing without keeping score. In life, it looks like preparation instead of excuses, and accountability instead of blame. Mature effort is steady, not emotional. It doesn't disappear when motivation fades. It understands that responsibility doesn't need permission. Initiative builds trust and respect because it shows people they don't have to carry the weight alone. When you take initiative, you remove uncertainty from the relationship. People stop wondering if they matter, if you care, or if you'll show up when it counts. Trust grows when actions come before reminders, when responsibility is handled without delay, and when effort is visible without being demanded. Initiative communicates reliability. It tells others that they can lean on you without fear of disappointment. Respect naturally follows, because no one truly respects someone they have to manage or chase. Taking initiative shows awareness and confidence reassures people. It creates balance where both sides feel equally invested instead of one person leading while the other reacts. Consistency matters more than grand gestures because life is built on repetition, not moments. Big actions may impress briefly, but they don't sustain connection. Anyone can do something dramatic once, but few can show up the same way every day. Consistency builds emotional security because people know what to expect from you. It eliminates confusion and replaces it with calm. In relationships, consistent communication, steady effort, and dependable behavior matter more than occasional surprises. A single apology cannot undo repeated neglect, and one grand display of affection cannot replace daily presence. Consistency proves sincerity. Over time, small actions repeated again and again build a stronger bond than rare, impressive ones. People trust patterns, not promises. True care anticipates needs instead of waiting for complaints. When you genuinely care, you pay attention to what isn't said as much as what is. You notice stress before it turns into frustration and distance before it turns into silence. Waiting for complaints often means you're already late. By the time someone speaks up, they're usually exhausted from feeling unheard. Anticipating needs shows emotional awareness and presence. It tells people they don't have to beg for consideration. This kind of care creates emotional safety because it reduces conflict before it starts. It shifts the dynamic from reactive to supportive. Anticipation doesn't mean perfection. It means effort driven by attentiveness. It shows that you're engaged, not just responding when things go wrong. Doing the right thing when no one is watching defines character, because character is formed in private choices, not public performance. Anyone can act right when there's recognition, praise, or pressure. Character shows itself when shortcuts are available and you still choose integrity. It's what guides decisions when silence would be easier and accountability seems optional. In relationships, character appears in loyalty when temptation is hidden and respect when your partner isn't present. In life, it shows through discipline without supervision and honesty without enforcement. These unseen decisions quietly shape who you become. People may never know every good thing you do, but they will feel it in how safe, respected, and valued they are around you. Character leaves a trace in trust, even when no one witnesses the effort. Love is shown best through action, not reminders, because words without movement eventually lose meaning. Anyone can say they care, but care becomes real only when it shows up consistently in behavior. When love has to be reminded, it starts to feel forced, like an obligation instead of a choice. Actions remove doubt. They speak when words fall short and remain steady when emotions fluctuate. Showing up, listening attentively, following through, and being present without being asked communicates commitment in its purest form. Over time, reminders create fatigue, but action builds reassurance. People don't want to feel like they are constantly negotiating for effort. They want to feel chosen naturally without having to explain why they deserve basic consideration. Initiative builds trust and respect because it demonstrates awareness and responsibility. When you take initiative, you show that you are paying attention to what needs to be done rather than waiting for instructions. This creates confidence in others because they know they can rely on you. Trust worlds when effort is proactive instead of reactive. Respect grows when people see that you don't need to be pushed to do what's right. In relationships, initiative prevents imbalance. One person doesn't become the manager while the other simply responds. Initiative communicates maturity, confidence, and genuine involvement. It tells people they are not alone in carrying the emotional or practical weight. Consistency matters more than grand gestures because consistency creates stability. Grand gestures may feel exciting in the moment, but they are temporary. Life is not lived in highlights, it's lived in routines. People feel safe with those who are steady, predictable in their care, and reliable in their effort. Consistency proves sincerity over time. A single big action cannot erase repeated absence, but repeated small actions build lasting trust. Showing up every day, keeping promises, and maintaining the same level of respect regardless of circumstances matters far more than occasional dramatic displays. Consistency builds a foundation people can stand on. True care anticipates needs rather than waiting for complaints. When you truly care, you observe. You notice changes in mood, energy, and behavior. You respond before frustration turns into resentment. Waiting for complaints often means you've already missed the opportunity to support. Anticipation shows emotional intelligence and presence. It tells people they don't have to beg to be understood. This kind of care reduces conflict because it addresses issues early. It creates emotional safety and reduces exhaustion. People feel valued when they know someone is thinking ahead for them, not just reacting after damage is done. Effort without prompting shows maturity because maturity understands responsibility without reminders. A mature person doesn't say, "You didn't ask," because they already know what is expected. Prompted effort feels temporary and conditional, while unprompted effort feels dependable. It shows ownership. In relationships, unprompted effort builds balance and mutual respect. In life, it builds credibility. People trust those who don't need to be supervised. They respect those who handle their responsibilities without excuses. Mature effort doesn't depend on mood or motivation. It depends on commitment. It quietly reinforces trust, reliability, and strength without needing recognition. Love is shown best through action, not reminders, because words alone eventually lose their power when they are not supported by behavior. Saying you care means very little if the effort behind it is inconsistent or conditional. When someone truly values another person, their actions naturally align with that feeling. They don't need to be chased, corrected, or constantly reminded to show up. Action creates clarity. It reassures people without arguments or explanations. When love becomes something that must be requested over and over, it starts to feel like an obligation instead of a choice. Action-driven love feels intentional and sincere because it removes doubt and replaces it with presence. Initiative builds trust and respect because it shows awareness and responsibility. Taking initiative means you don't wait for instructions to do what is clearly needed. You act because you understand your role. This builds trust because people know they can depend on you without worrying if they'll be let down. Respect grows in the same space because no one truly respects someone they have to manage. Initiative shows confidence, maturity, and commitment. In relationships, it prevents imbalance by ensuring both people are actively contributing rather than one leading and the other reacting. In life, initiative separates who wait from those who lead. Consistency matters more than grand gestures because life is shaped by repetition, not moments. Big actions may impress temporarily, but they fade quickly if they are not supported by steady effort. Anyone can rise to the occasion once, but few can maintain the same level of care every day. Consistency builds emotional security. It allows people to relax instead of constantly questioning intentions. Repeated small actions create trust, while occasional dramatic ones often feel compensatory. Consistency proves sincerity over time and shows that effort is not driven by mood, guilt, or pressure, but by commitment. True care anticipates needs rather than waiting for complaints. When you genuinely care, you pay attention to what isn't said as much as what is. You notice changes before they become problems and respond before frustration turns into resentment. Waiting for complaints usually means someone has already been feeling unheard for a long time. Anticipating needs shows emotional awareness and presence. It communicates that someone matters enough for you to think ahead. This kind of care reduces conflict and builds emotional safety because people they have to beg for understanding or support. Effort without prompting shows maturity because maturity understands responsibility without reminders. A mature person doesn't rely on motivation or instructions to do what's required. They recognize their obligations and handle them willingly. Prompted effort feels temporary, while unprompted effort feels dependable. In relationships, this creates balance and mutual respect. In life, it builds credibility. People trust those who consistently handle their responsibilities without excuses or supervision. Mature effort is steady, not emotional, and it doesn't disappear when recognition is absent. Doing the right thing when no one is watching defines character because character is formed in private choices, not public performance. Anyone can behave well when there is praise or pressure involved. True character reveals itself when shortcuts are available and integrity is optional. It shows in honesty when silence would be easier, in discipline without supervision, and in respect when no one is present to witness it. These unseen decisions quietly shape who a person becomes. Over time, character creates trust without explanation because people feel safe, respected, and valued around those who consistently choose what is right.